So today, for our keynote address, we have Austin Che. Austin Che is a co-founder of Ginkgo Bioworks. Ginkgo was founded in 2008 by 5 MIT alums, of which Austin is one. Today, Ginkgo is the leading horizontal platform for cell programming, proving flexible and end-to-end services that solve challenges for organizations across diverse markets, from food and agriculture to pharmaceuticals to industrial to specialty chemicals. Ginkgo's biosecurity and public health unit is building global infrastructure for biosecurity to empower governments, communities, and public health leaders to prevent, detect, and respond to a wide variety of biological threats. Welcome, Austin, please, to discuss his entrepreneurial journey from MIT to Ginkgo.
Well, it's great to be here back at MIT, well, sort of MIT. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about how I got to where I am today. So maybe I just start from the beginning. And when I was at Stanford as an undergrad in the Valley, and tech was all the rage, and I thought that everyone was getting rich on tech startups. So I thought I would go into be an entrepreneur in tech. So I was at Stanford in computer science. Everyone was an entrepreneur those days. My dad was an entrepreneur. All my classmates were. So this was an easy choice to make. And then I graduated in 2001, the dot-com bust, and it no longer seemed so exciting to be in tech. So needed to figure out what to do next after undergrad. So I looked around for grad school, applied to a wide-ranging set of schools and programs, and mainly I saw grad school as a way to delay the inevitable of trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I got into MIT for bioelectrical engineering, which at the time I did not know when I applied or when I got in what that was. So I visited MIT to figure out if it was for me, and the answer was no. But what happened when I visited MIT was I happened to meet Tom Knight, who later became my advisor, and he was a computer scientist. He had a long career in computer science, but then switched over to biology. Like what he had saw was that programming DNA, you could apply the same rules that you had in computer science. So he wanted to program DNA like we program computers, and I was a computer scientist who didn't want to program computers. And so I decided to go to MIT. I joined MIT, joined Tom's lab, and that was what set me on the path of this field and of Ginkgo starting. So this was, when I started MIT, I had no experience in biology. The last biology class I'd taken was probably high school, and I was not at all interested in biology as a science. But what Tom got me excited by was that biology could be an engineering discipline. We could use it to make things. We could build everything with biology. It's the functioning nanotechnology, and it's programmable. And so these were the early days of SynBio, and also where all of the founders of Ginkgo were working together during this period of time in the early 2000s. Now, of course, I had impeccable timing. I graduated from MIT in 2008. So my delaying of trying to figure out what to do with my life. So another crash and the great financial crisis. So we decided that was a great time to start Ginkgo, right there at the bottom. So that's where we started. So this is the rest of this talk is just about my thoughts about our journey from then to now. But just to jump forward a little bit, in 2021 we went public, and for once I think we had pretty good timing, just before the downturn. So I would summarize like how to build a company into 3 really easy steps. Just start, survive, and grow. So the first step is very easy. You just need to start. And I think the most impactful decision is like your founders. Who you're going to take this journey with. And you may hear that people, you should bring together a team with a mix of skills, but that complements each other. So 5 of us were basically the same background. 4 of us were all PhD students graduating at the same time, plus Tom. But what we had was a history of working together. We had worked together for almost a decade together. We had trust in each other, and I think what has really demonstrated this is that it's been 15, 16 years, and all 5 of us are still with the company. And I think that is pretty rare in Startup land. And also, we also all had the same vision of what we wanted for the company. There's also, in terms of like picking your founders, like, what sort of skill sets and who should you pick? There's like data showing that first-time founders actually do pretty poorly compared to like repeat founders. Experience seems to really matter. And there's like other data, the Harvard Business Review showing that as you get older, you have higher probability of success. Well, so what do you do if you're like me and I think a lot of the entrepreneurs in this room, you're a young first-time founder with no experience or under 30 and you want to start a company? Well, I would say you just do it. Well, so here's, and so when Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, was asked if he would start NVIDIA again, he said he wouldn't do it. And he says, you don't think anyone would start a company. Nobody in their right mind would do it. I agree with the sentiment, right? Like the advantage of a first-time founder, the advantage of not having experience is that you don't know how difficult it is, that you are naive about what it takes to start a company. And so you should start the company before you realize how bad of an idea it is. So ignore the stats, ignore all the chatter about lack of experience or whatnot, and I think first-time founders can do great. And in fact, I took a look, the 10 most valuable companies today by market cap, 8 of them, 80% of them were started by first-time founders. So when you succeed as a first-time founder, you succeed very big. So. The second point I want, after the founding team, what do you need next, right? So like what makes a business? I think there's like tech, markets, people. A lot of you maybe are focused a lot here on tech, and while it's important, I would say it's probably the least important. Warren Buffett, his view is, when a management with a reputation for brilliance tackles a business with a reputation for bad economics, it is the reputation of the business that remains intact. So what he's saying is that, the business is more important than management. And while this may be true for Buffett, and I admire him in many ways, I completely disagree with this. It is, especially in the startup world, I think the people that you bring on are far more important. Tech and markets can change on a dime. Like the right people and the right management, they can pick the right business. It is much harder the other way around. People are just intrinsically more important, more valuable than ideas. Like ideas can be good one day, terrible the next day, back to great, and they also diffuse extremely rapidly and easily, right? Like it's hard to keep good ideas to yourself. Good people, on the other hand, that's much harder to find. So my suggestion for the second step is collect great people. Just bring great people together, and they will figure out the good ideas. Ideas can come later. Talk a little bit about this, but Ginkgo had not start with a great business plan. We did enter the MIT 100K and failed many times. We did not succeed on having great ideas when we started. And just to sum up on like the people, right? So when we went public, this was in 2021. This was the New York Stock Exchange. They said this was the most people that they had ever seen come to an IPO. So I'm proud of the people that we've brought together over the years and building the company. And our mantra at Ginkgo, you can see on the banner, is grow everything. We want to grow everything with biology. That's what we want to do. And I think this mantra probably applies a lot to starting companies also. And, you can think of a business as a living organism. You've got to figure out what it takes what it needs to thrive and feed it. And it changes over time. So the next step is, how to survive as a business, as an organism. And like there's a lot of stats about how 90% of startups like fail, which may or may be true, but it's also true that 100% of you will die. What matters is like the path that you get while you're alive and what you accomplish, right? So I think those stats don't, ignore those stats also. This is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows the death rate over time, and not too surprisingly, the first year is the hardest, and so my recommendation is just do anything you can to survive the first year. And the way to do that, maybe counterintuitively, is maybe not to raise money. Not having money is one way to die, but having money not necessarily the way to not run out of money. So this is Ginkgo's fundraising history. I could zoom in between 2008 and 2014, but you would still see nothing there. We raised $0 for 6 years when we started. So we bootstrapped in a pretty difficult macroeconomic environment, but we survived. And one lesson for us was that starting in this sort of environment is actually, there's a lot of benefits. One is like you learn to be thrifty. You learn to, it was difficult for us, but it was also difficult for everyone, right? Like if you think about it, when you're starting out, it sort of levels the playing field. Everyone doesn't have money. So you're on equal footing. The other thing was companies going out of business left and right, and we were there to feast on those corpse of those dead companies. We were there with U-Hauls, with all the biotechs going out of business, and just loading up on anything that they wanted to get rid of. So that's how we got started, and also coming out of MIT and being a grad student, that also helps. You're sort of used to not living on much of anything. Just continuing the grad school experience for another 6 years. So that was the first couple years, and then 2014 we took our first diluted fundraise. We entered Y Combinator as the first biotech. 2014, and then sort of different phase of Ginkgo. Right after that, we raised then a $10 million round, and a $50 million round, and a $150 million round, and like a $500 million round, and then we $1.5 billion when we went public. So the phases of Ginkgo have been pretty stark, where we were in sort of the no money raised, and then a lot of money. And I would say that there's a lot of alternative sources of funding, and the center here is certainly one of them. But we certainly survived a lot on government funding early on from the DOE, DOD, and other agencies, and it was also one of the reasons why we switched from the slow government funding route in the first couple of years to growth and fundraising, was that there was one of our competitors had gotten a large government grant that we had applied for, and we didn't get, and it went to our competitor, and we were worried that they would run ahead of us, and so we decided to fundraise then, and a couple years ago we acquired that competitor. So I think overall, I think we'd be dead if we had raised money earlier. The bottom line, of surviving as a startup is really having the will to survive, and not necessarily just about money, and being able to survive an environment of scarcity helps improve that will to survive. Also super important for any business is timing. Not too surprisingly, it was like we graduated in 2008, started in 2008. That didn't just happen to be the right time to start the business. That's not when the customers wanted to come. That's not when the funding was available. And so we needed to basically just survive until the right time. And that's what we did. So next, I just bring you to today and where we are today, and what we do today. So our mission is to make biology easier to engineer, and we do this across industries. Some of the services we provide are shown here. We do like computational enzyme design, enzyme screening, strain optimization, and scale up. I should again emphasize this is not what we started with. When we started Ginkgo, we started Ginkgo with 5 people. We did not have any IP out of MIT or otherwise. We did not have any technology. We did not have a business plan. What we had was just a mission, a vision that we want to make biology easier to engineer, and 5 smart people to try to figure it out. So today, these are some of our customers. We provide a horizontal platform across a large number of industries, and we are sort of agnostic to products and in industry. We make it easy for everyone, not just Ginkgo, to engineer biology. We work with companies, large and small, academics, governments, everyone. And fundamentally, what we do at Ginkgo is we have a foundry, which is sort of like our automation. We have a highly flexible and robotic automation system for bioengineering. We have what we call our code base, which is a large proprietary database of sequences and other information, and we can train AI models to feed the loop. We also have a ever-growing number of technology network partners shown here that our customers can access. So we're basically like an integration partner if one of our customers wants to combine a bunch of technologies from a number of sources. So let me summarize again, sort of like my journey, from at Ginkgo. And like I say, I think the most important thing is to take it step by step. And step 1 is pretty simple. It's in the word startup. You got to start. And there's no perfect route. There's no handbook for how to start. There's no reason to wait for everything to be perfect. Look at how we started. We started, in the midst of a recession without any experience, without any investors, without a business plan, without IP, without technology. What else could we not have had when we started? But everything else is derivative. Like if you want to make a company work, you can make it work. So you can find money, you can find a business plan, you can develop technology to start a company. Okay. I think the other part, just saying that I would say that founding a company is like one of the most asymmetric return, risk return that you can make as a bet, right? Like you can become a billionaire, or you could, the company go to zero, and which the cost for starting a company is really just the opportunity cost. And if you're just a grad student, looking to be a postdoc, the opportunity cost is pretty low, right? So might as well start a company. Next step, survive. This is how we survived. You got to figure out a viable business before you run out of money, and it's about I think a couple of the more important things I think we did was getting the right team, recruiting great people, like I mentioned, looking for alternative funding sources and being creative in procurement. Think about both the inflows and the outflows. The other part is, there are probably a lot of scientists here. We were scientists, and we ran a business like scientists. We didn't have strongly held views about what the business should be. We had a hypothesis, and we tested it, and we disproved a lot of them, and we iterated. We were happy to pivot when our customers told us to, and we did. And that's how you survive. Just got to be nimble and listen to what the customers are telling you. Next phase, growth. You got to. I think the hardest part is timing. It's about when to grow. Also growing the great people that you hired. At Ginkgo, one of our things is about how do we develop the next set of developing an ownership culture. Like founders, as a founder-led company, you intrinsically have the view that ownership is a good thing. You own the company. But once, we're at 1,200 people now, and the founders, we will leave at some point. And how will it continue as a sustainable company? We need the workers at Ginkgo to feel and think like owners. And then maybe the last thing is just sort of in terms of growth, just being unreasonable in your aims and goals, I think is helpful. Even even if you don't hit your goals and you still hit high, you might still hit high, right? But if you aim low and you hit it, so what? It's like a business is not just about succeeding; it's about also your competitors not being able to succeed where you are, right? So if you tackle something easy, your competitors almost certainly can do so also, and you might probably don't have a viable business. And so I think a lot of things just become easier when you go after harder problems, including fundraising and recruiting and so on. So wrap up, for all of you on this path, wish you all the best. This is one of the most wondrous and impactful and difficult things that you might do. Happy to take some questions.
The nice man has microphone for people who would like to ask questions.
Thank you very much. I was curious to know, what was the first technology that Ginkgo developed that set you on the pathway when you started off with no IP, no technology, no funding? What was the first technology that you developed?
You mean at MIT before we started?
No, when you started the company, after you started the company.
What we did was automate a lot of workflows and figure out how to aggregate a lot of demand onto sort of single platforms, right? So our current business model is basically that it's like the AWS business model, right? People can outsource to us and don't have to pay a bunch of CapEx, right? So we basically converting CapEx to OpEx for our customers. And so for us, it's basically figuring out those scale economies and making it so that it makes sense to do that. So it's a lot of process improvements.
Thank you so much for this fantastic talk. My name is Davide. I'm a CEO of a company that we started out of C-Sale.
Yep.
I actually believe some of our founders shared some space with you guys, yes. So thank you so much for this presentation. I have one question on one of the sentences that you wrote that stuck with me, growing your people into owners. So in my imagination, when I started 2 companies, the idea was typically if you join a startup, you want to trade salary for shares. So you're willing to take a lower salary, for the potential payout that you'll get. And then you behave like an owner. But what I've noticed over the years is that the value of the stock options that you give is not very much taken into account because most people make the inference that, who knows if this will survive or not. So at the end of the day, you end up paying people market rates. So how did you turn people into owners?
In the early days, it's hard, right? Because you're selling a dream, right? And you're just you need to recruit people who believe in the vision, and so you are basically finding people who are like the founders, right? But I should mention, we don't have anyone all 5 founders are still with the company, but the earliest employee after that is started 5 years or so after Ginkgo, right? So the people who joined us in the early days, we were not able to retain, right? They did leave. And so, but I think newer, the question is these days, there are millionaires that have, liquid stock and why are they staying around? Maybe that's the question. It's they're no longer, there's no financial incentive is no longer enough, right? For one at a certain point. And so I think a lot of the incentives needs to be around beyond financial. It's what is it that they're trying to accomplish, whether it's along the mission or otherwise. But in terms of compensation, I agree with what you're saying. Is that generally you do need to pay people a market salary, and the upside is in the equity.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that presentation. So I have a question about how the pandemic affected your business or your business model, or the philosophy that you have around how to survive and grow.
So the pandemic, we have two business units right now. We have the cell engineering and then the biosecurity arm. And the biosecurity completely came out of the pandemic. And it was not expected, but it was something that made sense for us, right? Like our view is that what we're doing is we're engineering biology, and biology can be dangerous and can go out of control, and you sort of need the counterpart to detect that. And so the pandemic sort of accelerated that. So during the pandemic, we became the largest school testing, and now we work with the CDC for international travel. We work with a bunch of countries, and so that entire business came out of the pandemic, and it surpassed our other half of the business in revenue, right? Because we were just doing so much in that space. So I think it certainly didn't hurt us too much, and we helped with the Moderna vaccine. We did a lot of projects during the pandemic. We pivoted. That wasn't necessarily what we would have done if the pandemic hadn't happened, but we were able to apply our platform to projects to support the response.
It's great to hear your talk, because we spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs teaching them how to pitch to raise money.
Yeah.
We also, when you see your basic phases of the company, it's start and then it's funding, right? You don't even typically start the company until you've secured some funding, at least in the biotech space.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated that between start and grow, you have survived, which obviously everybody has to do. Can you tell us a little more about how you started a company with 5 people that I assume needed to put food on the table and a roof over your head, and I assume had to have a lab, and then 4 or 5 slides later you say, we used alternative funding. What is it that you're doing? Because most of us spend a lot of time begging venture capitalists to give us money. And over the last couple of years, you probably know that's been a difficult exercise to do. So I'd really like to hear a lot more about how you guys got this alternative funding and survived.
Yeah, so it's space. Let's start with space, because space is obviously, especially lab space, right? We're a biotech, you need a lab space, and so we're at Cambridge. And we just need a small amount of space. So where we ended up and where we still are is in the Marine Industrial Park. Where we started, when we moved in, it was just some empty warehouse space next to Aflac, and what we did was, the city of Boston, Mayor Menino wanted to make that a new innovation park, and we got some money from the city, and he was there to open our new space, which was just not that special, but it was cheap, and we could get there, and we've been there ever since, and we're building a new building and right next door that we're going to be moving into shortly. So I think the city for sure supported us on the space front, we started with we were lucky early on to get a contract with this is actually a Scottish agency to it was like contract work, right? To work on the projects. We did a bunch of just random contract things that may or may not be relevant, to our future business, but we fed the bills, fed ourselves, and we were basically like postdocs, we were living on like a typical postdoc salary, and I think, you can ask how do postdocs survive, and we were basically doing the same thing. We were applying grants left and right, and funding ourselves like that, and in the process sort of building up the infrastructure to go for bigger things. But that's slow, right? I think this is why you cannot actually go for VCs if you're going to go this route, because no VC is waiting 6 years for you to do nothing, for you to just slowly build things up. They need to exit in 5 years, and so you got to raise at the right time. So if we had VCs on early on, we would not have been able to do this. They would have forced us to grow faster.
Thank you again. I don't want to monopolize, but if nobody has a question, I would love to hear your maybe super long-term view. Where do you see the world going, you know, if all your dreams come true, if the movie plays out to the best outcome?
How far in the future you think?
Yeah.
I think the dream is this, right? This is our dream is that we're going to grow everything. Like biology is you know, what it's like asking what do you expect computers to do, you know, 40 years ago, and it's not even like an industry anymore. Like computing is just part of everything, right? And biology, our view is the same for like physical matter. Like it's programmable. If you get programmed matter, you know, what will the world look like? And I think it's hard to imagine what that would look like, because I don't know that you could predict the world today, you know, 50 years ago, just in terms of like on the computing side of things. And so what we want to do is just be that enabling factor, and we don't have all the creativity to come up with all the applications that might be out there, and we just want to provide the tools for that world to happen.
Thanks so much for this inspiring talk. I'm postdoc myself right now, and you talked a lot about the right people. Mm-hmm. Early on, and maybe even still now, what did you trust to find the right people? Was it more you trusted your feeling of like, well, these are the first hires, or did you have more like an algorithmic approach of this is what the person needs to fulfill to be part of my team?
Well, the problem with the algorithm, like looking for skill sets, is that it might change very quickly, right? And so unless you're sure that you're not pivoting, that you have a business, you know exactly what you want, I think it's or especially early on, you really want to hire generalists and people who are just smart and that you can trust. I think that, you know, founders that work together, all our early employees were also mostly from like sort of like MIT networks and people we had worked together before, right? And those were also the people we could convince, right, to join us on this. So there's a little bit of like, if you're crazy enough to join me on this, then you're probably, you know, maybe a good fit. But yeah, hiring is one of the most difficult things. Bad hires is extremely difficult to recover from, especially early on.
Fire away.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So the answer will be in terms of number of years. Let's say on one end, I want to grow a tree that grows exactly as a 2x4, just ready for construction. Mm-hmm. And the other end, I want to grow a microchip. What do you think will be the timescales of these two events, if possible at all?
You mean the timescale when we can do that, or the timescale when we're, like how long it will take to grow a microchip when we can?
Yeah, approximately. Do you think this will ever be possible?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I think I think that's extremely hard to predict. You know, like I think what has been shown with things like ChatGPT, right? It's like AI has been around forever, and something happens, and suddenly like there's an explosion, right? And I think that moment of like, you know, that internet moment or whatnot has not. I don't know what that looks like, but it hasn't. When that happens, things will move extremely quickly and much quicker than we can expect. So, you know, like I don't think it's going to be in the short term, but I also think that it will surprise us how quickly it happens.
Good answer, actually. Thank you, Austin.